Listen to the sound of Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. It is not the sound of a factory. It is the deafening, chaotic roar of a heavy industrial warzone. It is the screech of plasma cutters slicing through high-yield armor plate. It is the rhythmic, concussive thud of massive pneumatic hammers. It is the hiss of millions of argon-shielded welding arcs burning brighter than the sun. In this sprawling, heavily guarded labyrinth of steel and concrete, over 25,000 human beings are engaged in the most complex, agonizingly slow, and obscenely expensive manufacturing process on planet Earth. They are not building a ship. They are forging a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered apex predator. They are building a Gerald R. Ford-class supercarrier. When the general public looks at an aircraft carrier, they see the finished product. A pristine gray leviathan cutting through the ocean, launching fighter jets to project American hegemony. But what they do not see is the decade of brutal, dangerous labor, the staggering multi-billion-dollar cost overruns, and the terrifying engineering gambles required to bring that machine into existence. Building a supercarrier is not a matter of simply welding steel plates together. It is an exercise in pushing the boundaries of metallurgy, nuclear physics, and digital architecture to their absolute breaking points. In this deep dive documentary, we are going to bypass the sanitized Navy press releases and take you inside the gritty, hazardous reality of Dry Dock 12. We will dissect the forensic engineering of superlifts, moving 1,000-ton blocks of steel with millimeter precision. We will expose the agonizing, years-long nightmare of debugging the ship's revolutionary electromagnetic catapults. And we will explain the terrifying, hyper-classified process of installing 2 live nuclear reactors into the belly of the beast. This is the unvarnished story of how America builds its billion-dollar leviathans. The birth of a Ford-class supercarrier does not begin with the dramatic cutting of steel. It begins inside a massive, climate-controlled server farm. The USS Gerald R. Ford and her sister ships, the USS John F. Kennedy and the USS Enterprise, are the first warships in human history to be designed entirely in a 3-dimensional digital virtual reality environment. Every single one of the ship's roughly 3 million components, from the massive bronze propellers down to the smallest electrical junction box and the precise routing of millions of feet of fiber optic cable, was mapped in a digital matrix years before construction began. This is not just a high-tech gimmick, it is an absolute engineering necessity. On older carriers like the Nimitz class, which were designed using traditional 2-dimensional blueprints, workers would constantly run into interference issues during construction. A pipe fitter would arrive to install a high-pressure steam line, only to discover that an electrician had already run a massive cable bundle through the exact same space. The resulting teardowns, redesigns, and rework cost the Navy hundreds of millions of dollars in wasted labor. By building the ship perfectly in the digital realm first, Huntington Ingalls Industries, HII, eliminated these physical clashes, theoretically saving massive amounts of time and taxpayer money. Once the digital blueprint is locked, the physical brutality begins. The backbone of the carrier is its steel, but this is not the steel used to build a skyscraper or a civilian cargo ship. It is primarily HSLA 115 high-strength low-alloy steel. This specialized metallurgy is designed to possess incredible tensile strength to withstand the massive torsional flexing of the ocean, while also maintaining high elasticity to absorb the concussive shockwave of a nearby torpedo detonation or a direct missile strike without shattering. Working with HSLA 115 is a metallurgical nightmare. It cannot be welded using standard techniques. Welders must carefully preheat the massive steel plates to specific temperatures before striking an arc, and they must precisely control the cooling rate to prevent the microscopic crystalline structure of the steel from becoming brittle and cracking. Every single structural weld on the lower hull is subjected to rigorous, unforgiving non-destructive testing, X-rays and ultrasonic scans, to ensure absolute microscopic perfection. A single flawed weld in the keel could cause the ship to break its back in a Category 5 typhoon. The actual assembly of the carrier relies on a revolutionary process known as modular construction. The shipyard does not build the carrier from the bottom up in a single, continuous pile. Instead, the ship is broken down into roughly 160 massive superlifts. These are gigantic multi-deck sections of the ship, built entirely separate from the dry dock in massive, covered fabrication facilities. The genius of the superlift method is outfitting. While a massive steel block is sitting on the ground, workers can easily install the heavy pumps, the miles of electrical wiring, the ventilation ducts, and the plumbing. Doing this work while the block is easily accessible saves millions of man-hours compared to trying to drag heavy equipment through the claustrophobic, dark corridors of a partially completed ship. When a superlift is finished, the true spectacle begins. These blocks can weigh anywhere from 500 to over 1,000 tons. Moving them requires Big Blue, a massive, iconic gantry crane that dominates the Newport News skyline. Big Blue slowly hoists the gargantuan steel block high into the air and delicately traverses it over dry dock 12. The precision required in this evolution is terrifying. The crane operators and the riggers must lower a 1,000-ton block of steel, swaying slightly in the wind, and align it perfectly with the existing hull structure. The tolerances are measured in millimeters. If a superlift is misaligned, the structural frames will not mate, the pipes will not connect, and the entire multi-billion-dollar puzzle falls apart. When the block touches down, a small army of shipfitters and welders swarms the seam, immediately locking the steel into place. Slowly, agonizingly, piece by massive piece, the steel canyon in the dry dock rises. As the hull takes shape, the most highly classified and dangerous phase of construction occurs: the installation of the nuclear heart. Deep within the heavily armored lower decks of the carrier, shipwrights construct the reactor compartments. These are essentially massive, heavily shielded vaults designed to contain the twin A1B pressurized water reactors. The exact design and shielding parameters of the A1B are among the most closely guarded secrets in the United States government. The installation of the reactor vessels and the primary coolant loops is governed by extreme radiation safety protocols and relentless oversight by naval reactors, the notoriously strict agency that oversees the nuclear fleet. The environment must be kept immaculately clean. A single dropped bolt, a stray piece of wire, or a forgotten tool accidentally sealed inside the primary coolant loop could eventually vibrate loose, get sucked into the reactor core, and trigger a catastrophic nuclear meltdown. The workers executing this phase are subjected to extreme background checks and must operate with a flawless zero-defect mentality. Once the reactors are installed and sealed, the heavy armored decks above them are welded shut. The ship now possesses a heartbeat that will provide virtually limitless energy for the next 25 years, without ever needing a drop of conventional fuel. As the steel hull reaches its 24-story peak, the focus shifts to the flight deck, and this is where the Ford-class program nearly derailed entirely. The Navy made a massive, highly controversial gamble. Instead of relying on the proven, reliable steam catapults that had launched aircraft for half a century, they mandated the installation of the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, or EMALS. EMALS replaces explosive steam pressure with linear induction motors. essentially utilizing a massive traveling magnetic wave to violently pull the aircraft down the track. In theory, EMALS is infinitely superior. It is smoother, puts less structural stress on the multi-million-dollar fighter jets, and can be instantly calibrated to launch anything from a heavy, fully loaded bomber to a lightweight drone. But turning that theory into reality was an agonizing, multi-year engineering nightmare. Integrating the massive electrical pulse power required for EMALS into the ship's grid caused cascading software failures. During early testing, the system was notoriously unreliable. It would suffer critical faults, requiring hours of physical troubleshooting to reset. On a warship where launching aircraft quickly is the sole metric of survival, an unreliable catapult is a fatal flaw. HII engineers and Navy technicians spent years conducting dead load testing. They dragged massive heavy steel sleds, weighing up to 80,000 pounds to simulate a fully loaded fighter jet onto the catapult track. The system would fire, hurling the massive steel blocks off the bow of the ship and splashing violently into the James River. They did this thousands of times, adjusting the algorithms, reinforcing the magnetic coils, and rewriting the software code until the system finally reached an acceptable level of combat reliability. Simultaneously, the shipyard was fighting a similar war on the other end of the flight deck with the Advanced Arresting Gear, or AAG. The AAG replaced the old, reliable hydraulic rams used to catch landing jets with a complex system of water twisters and electric induction motors. The goal was to provide a highly precise, software-controlled deceleration to reduce stress on the aircraft's tailhook and airframe. But just like EMALS, the AAG suffered from massive software glitches, mechanical failures, and staggering cost overruns. The delays caused by debugging these two revolutionary systems pushed the delivery of the USS Gerald R forward back by years and inflated the final price tag to a staggering $13 billion, drawing intense, furious scrutiny from Congress and defense analysts. The shipyard was learning a brutal lesson. You cannot simply invent new physics on a tight schedule. Deep within the hull, another revolutionary system was causing its own unique brand of chaos: the advanced weapons elevators. On legacy Nimitz-class carriers, the elevators that moved heavy bombs and missiles from the deep magazines up to the flight deck relied on thick steel cables and mechanical winches. They were reliable but slow. The Ford-class implemented elevators that operate using the same magnetic linear synchronous motor technology as high-speed maglev trains. They travel in blast-proof shafts and are designed to move 24,000 pounds of ordnance at 150 feet per minute, drastically increasing the speed at which the carrier can arm its strike fighters. However, an aircraft carrier is not a rigid concrete building. It is a flexible steel box that twists and bends as it moves through the ocean. When the hull flexed, the incredibly tight tolerances of the magnetic elevator guide rails would misalign. The software would panic, and the heavy blast doors would jam shut. Fixing the elevators required teams of specialized engineers practically living inside the shafts, redesigning the physical tolerances to allow for the natural flexing of the hull and rewriting thousands of lines of code. It took years after the ship was officially commissioned for all 11 elevators to be certified fully operational. After years of relentless construction, thousands of welds, and millions of man-hours, the dry dock is finally flooded. Over 100 million gallons of water from the James River are slowly pumped into the concrete basin. Naval architects watch the draft marks intensely, waiting for the precise moment the ship's buoyancy overcomes gravity and the 100,000-ton hull lifts off the crushed wooden keel blocks. This is the christening, a highly emotional milestone, but the ship is still essentially a hollow, floating steel barge. It is moved to an outfitting pier for the final grueling phase of construction. Here, the miles of fiber optic cables are pulled, the massive phased array radars are bolted to the island's superstructure, and the combat systems are slowly, methodically brought online. The ultimate test of this decade-long industrial marathon is sea trials. The carrier casts off its lines and heads into the brutal environment of the open Atlantic. This is not a gentle pleasure cruise, it is a violent, intentional stress test. The ship is pushed to its absolute physical limits. The engineering crew brings the nuclear reactors to 100% power, testing the massive steam turbines and driving the ship to its maximum classified speed. The captain orders high-speed rudder turns, throwing the massive rudders hard over while maintaining flank speed. The ship leans heavily into the turn, the flight deck tilting at a dramatic angle, placing immense asymmetrical hydrodynamic stress on the propeller shafts and the hull structure. Every radar is tested. Every catapult is fired. The crew runs constant damage control drills, simulating catastrophic fires and massive hull breaches. Hundreds of shipyard engineers are on board, monitoring millions of data points, searching for any vibration, any software glitch, or any structural weakness that needs to be corrected before the ship is handed over to the fleet. Building an aircraft carrier is the ultimate expression of a nation's industrial capacity and geopolitical will. It requires a level of sustained financial commitment, specialized metallurgy, and highly trained human labor that very few nations on Earth possess. China is desperately trying to catch up, launching their own carriers like the Fujian, but they are still struggling to master the nuclear propulsion and advanced metallurgy that the United States has refined over decades. Russia's carrier program is essentially defunct, relying on a single, crumbling ship that spends more time on fire in dry dock than it does at sea. The Ford-class program, despite its agonizing delays and astronomical costs, guarantees that the United States Navy will maintain absolute, uncontested supremacy of the global oceans well into the 22nd century. The men and women of Newport News Shipbuilding, laboring in the heat, the noise, and the danger of Dry Dock 12, are not just welding steel. They are forging the very foundation of American global power projection, 1,000-ton block at a time. If this deep, unvarnished look into the forensic metallurgy, the terrifying radiation protocols, and the grueling engineering nightmares of building a supercarrier changed your perspective on naval construction, I have a vital request for you. Please subscribe to the Tactical Chow channel. We refuse to read you sanitized public relations brochures. We dissect the mechanical grit, the software failures, and the massive logistical triumphs that truly dictate global military supremacy. I would also highly appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It acts as the electromagnetic pulse that accelerates this documentary past the restrictive YouTube algorithm and out to a wider audience of engineering and military history enthusiasts. Finally, leave a comment below. I want to know, do you believe the Navy was right to risk billions of dollars and years of delays by putting unproven magnetic catapults and elevators on the very first Ford-class ship? Or should they have stuck with proven, reliable